are the consequences of Sykes-Picot Agreement? The fact is that some, unfortunately, countries and major countries insist on the sacredness, so-called sacredness, of this agreement. In fact, we see the result in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, in Lebanon, and we'll see it in Iran. These are all multinational, multi-ethnic countries that are ruled by one nationality or one ethnic group or one religious sect at the detriment of the other nationalities. And this will not pass. In other words, that was true when people, for whatever reason, were oppressed, suppressed, but now with the invention and invent of the internet, people seem to know what their interests are, and in most cases those interests are not the interests that this agreement 100 years ago by the colonial power, that is the French and British colonial power. And moreover, today the interests of even big powers are not served because, for instance, in Syria, if you look at the issue and the problem is that, in other words, group of peoples are forced together, whereas usually a governance, a legitimate government, is always the legitimacy comes from the peoples, not from one dictator imposing his or her will, or one nationality imposing its own nationality. You know, and for instance, in Iran is a good example. Iran is another multinational, multilingual, multicultural country like Iraq and Syria, but in fact the Turkic-speaking people are far greater than the Persian-speaking people. But Turkish-speaking people do not have any rights. We see that in Iraq with the Kurdish, with the Turkmen, with the Arabs, in Syria and everything. So in other words, this agreement is in opposition to the people and human beings' experience, the experience of the 150. Yeah, the new project, if there is to be a new Sykes-Picot agreement, needs to be based upon the interest of the people. It needs to take its legitimacy from the peoples, from their nationalities, from the constituencies that live in that country. And willingly, only peoples who are willingly decide to live together can bring security and stability. The fact is that Sykes-Picot in 100 years brought neither security nor stability to the area. So the project, the future project, needs to take account of the people's self-determination, people's interests, and the fact is that do not impose artificial boundaries and on the people. The future interest needs to take the fact, acknowledge the existence of people. If you're asking how the people, they need to go to peoples. First of all, one of the biggest problems in the Middle East was centralization of power. You have to start with decentralization. In other words, the devaluation of power. Power needs to be devolved from the top to the bottom. So the central power, central governments were in fact the problems for 100 years. So decentralization, where people, if they have to live in one country, they should have autonomy in their own regions. They should have their own, they should run their own affairs. They have their own parliaments, their own police, their own education, their own legislative power, and willingly live together. If there are any central government, it's best to be not very go ahead. Iran is playing a very destructive role, as we have seen. Iran comes and rules Iraq and interferes in the internal affairs of Iraq and Syria and takes sides with one ethnic groups against other, whereas in Iran itself, okay, you know, you have the most diverse country where Persians, Kurds, Arab, Turkmen, Baluch, and Azerbaijanis live, but in fact only one ethnic group rules, okay? And this will not exist. This will not, as we've seen, the Soviet Union with its big power could not force people to live together. Iran is no stronger than the Soviet Union. So Iran is playing a very destructive role in Syria, where it's trying to support and impose a dictator on its own peoples and on its own constituencies, whereas inside Iran there are currently insurgencies by Kurdish people, Ahwazi Arab people, Baluch people, and other peoples against the rule of the central government. If the Iranian government wants decentralization, let's say in Iraq, it should start from Tehran. It should allow the Kurdish people of Iran, the Arab nation of Iran, and the Baluch and others, their own self-determination. Iran with Russia will pay for it. I think Russia, after the Soviet Union, will come to see that the ethnic groups that live in Russia will not stand the current dictatorship by imposed on them by the Russians.